Hey Sun, I'm Daisy Victoria, and welcome to a video all about making the Skjoldeham hood. Or maybe it's Skjoldeham. It is Norwegian. This hood is part of a grave find from Skjoldehamn in Norway. This was discovered in the 1930s, and it is an entire grave find, so there's an entire outfit actually, and it dates to the 11th century or the 1000s. The hood in particular is really cool because it is the only extant hood that we currently have from this early in Western Europe. Now, was it a typical hood that everyone wore, or was it something special? Nobody really knows, but it is something that we have come to recreate all over the place. It's a really simple hood to make, it's all rectangles, and it serves such a variety of purposes. I've seen these hoods used in various reenactments, LARPs, cosplay, you name it. I wanted to note too, this hood is often called a Viking hood, like if you're looking for it online or in reenactor circles, and technically it's a little bit late to be like in the Viking Age, but there's not really a hood that's directly in the Viking Age, and a lot of reenactors want something just for functionality. And since we have so little that has survived from the Viking Age, especially textile-wise, maybe we have a lot of like jewelry and trinkets and stuff, but we have so little textiles that anything that you can get that could be maybe extrapolated in is often something that people will use just to fill in the gaps. So that way you can get a more robust wardrobe and be able to use it for whatever your purposes are. So whether you're doing medieval, Viking Age, fantasy, LARP, cosplay, or regular everyday life, let's make a Skjoldeham hood or Skjoldeham hood. So this hood is interesting because you can make it as like the basic variant, and that's what I made in the video that I released before. It was a black wool hood with an embroidery on it, and that one was just like the base pattern. But in the find, there's a little bit more to it. So there are ties that we're not entirely certain whether they would tie behind or in front. People have kind of played with it, and I'll show you what it looks like both ways at the end. And interestingly, there's also stitching at the top of the hood, like along the crown of the head, and it forms like a ridge, and that ridge is kind of helpful, so it'll like make the hood stay up, stay forward, and it might help to keep the weather out of your face. People have some ideas, but obviously we can't go back in time and ask, so we're just doing like an experimental archaeology and seeing how it works for us and what we can kind of conclude from that. When I made the regular hood before, some folks were interested in me adding the ridge to it. So I thought that this time, this video is connected to a PDF tutorial I just released. So I have a pattern and instructions that you can print out and use that to help you make your own hood. And I did include, so you can make it the standard regular way, or you can add on the ridge and the ties, whichever you prefer. Now I'm simplifying the ridge very slightly, and I'll tell you why. So in the original find, this is outlined by Løvlid's paper from 2009. Løvlid describes the stitching on the ridge of the hood. So there are multiple rows of stitching on the hood, and they're not exactly straight. So a couple of them are kind of straight, like you would kind of think of top stitching, but then just extra rows of them. But one sort of loops around another row, and I thought that to make it easy for the modern sewist, we would just do them as all straight rows and not like loop them all around each other. Let's make it so you can just put it through the sewing machine or even do it by hand if you prefer. Sometimes I have people ask if it's possible to make my patterns completely hand stitched, and absolutely it is. There's nothing here that you have to do by machine. I just use the machine because hand sewing is not my jam. My jam is more tailoring and pattern drafting, and I'd prefer to just sew it quickly through the machine. But for others, hand sewing is what brings the joy, and if that is what brings you joy, you can absolutely still use my patterns, just stitch it by hand instead of the machine. Hi, just real quick, I forgot to make a note on fabrics. So you can make this actually out of any fabric that's not stretchy. The original from the find was made out of a tutu wool twill. So you could use a wool twill to be very accurate to the find, or you could use anything you like. In this sample in the video, I am using wool, and it's kind of a thick wool, so it's not lined. The original also doesn't have a lining, but you can line this hood. You can still use the same pattern. You will just make also a lining, and then you could either sew the hood all together, lining and exterior, and hem it, or you could sew them separately and do a bag lining. But in the tutorial, we're doing a single layer of wool, and you could use wool, you could use flannel, you could use fleece even. I guess anything warm would really be best, but also if you want a lightweight one, you could use linen, and that would be really nice. I'm using this plaid wool. It's brown and it's got some red, blue, and yellow in it. These are all sort of plausible colors for the period. And I've cut out one long body piece and two insert gores, and that's all the pieces that we need aside from optional ties. We're actually just going to make it out of these 3 pieces of fabric. You could also even make the body piece out of 2 pieces of fabric sewn together. So this is just like an easy way to cut it out, but technically it would save more fabric if you cut it in 2 pieces and then sewed those together at the top of the head as well. I went ahead and serged all of my edges so that way there's no fraying or unraveling. You can finish your seams however you like. Sewing this together is pretty simple. So we're going to take that long body piece and we're going to sew those 2 inserts, the 2 gores, onto each side. So if we look at one end here, we're sewing a gore to each side of that end. Once we have those gores attached, we're going to do the same thing on the other side, but we're sewing the adjacent side of the square. So adjacent meaning the one that shares a corner with the side that we just sewed on. So we're going to fold over the body piece of the hood, and we're going to take those gores and we're going to line them up so that the adjacent side is now sewn to the other edge of the body piece. And we're doing that for both sides. For the back of the hood, we're going to sew this all the way shut. So we're going to sew from where we attached that insert gore all the way up to the top so that the back of the hood is closed. On the front of the hood, I like to sew here above the gore just a little bit, maybe like an inch or so. Once you have the hood sewn together, you have to hem all the edges. So hem all the lower edge and hem the face opening. And if you're just making your basic hood, that's it. This is actually complete. next I will show you how to add the ties and the ridge to the top of the hood. My pattern is marked where these ties go. Now, if you find that you want to move them, that's totally fine. The ties are just a piece of cord, and I just stitched those on with a really good tight zigzag stitch on the machine. You can obviously stitch them on by hand as well. And then the ridge is just stitched 3 rows along the upper edge of the hood. I did mark those on the pattern too, but obviously you can move them or play with them as you like. And I gave you plenty to work with the ridge, so this is definitely kind of a large ridge. But if you use something like linen, just note that you're going to have not as rigid or stiff of a head comb here as you would with a thicker wool. But you could counteract that by stitching extra stitches, or you could make it less rigid by stitching fewer rows of stitches. So that's just kind of a note on if you want to modify it for your own personal taste or purposes. So overall, I think this is a really nice interpretation of the hood from the Skjoldeham find without being a 100% exact replica, because like I said, we're making this in a way that's simple for the modern sewist. This is something that I think everyone could do pretty easily, and it's an easy pattern to use for a lot of purposes. So I wanted to make something that still is specific to the find, but also is very versatile, so it'll work for a lot of different people and a lot of different applications. For this video, I did make the size large from my pattern, so as opposed to the original one I made last year is the size small in this pattern. I hope you've enjoyed making this hood with me. Don't forget to grab my PDF pattern if you'd like to have that to print out and create your own hood. And if you do create a hood, I would love to see what you make. You can find me on all the social medias as Daisy Victoria. My website is daisyvictoria.com. And a special thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. I hope you have an absolutely magical day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.